Um, yeah. Uh, so as I was saying, we'll meditate for 20 minutes and then I'll talk. And as I was saying before, this talk that I plan on giving, it's outlined somewhat. It may take a little while. We'll see. So hopefully it doesn't run over. I do like to keep this class to an hour. I think getting on Zoom in the middle of the day or the beginning of the day, and you don't want to sit there for too long staring at your screen. You have other important screens to stare at. So for the rest of the day. Um, all right. So I'm gonna settle back myself. I kind of have this tendency to lean into the screen when I first start the day. So, okay. Um, we're getting everybody signed in. People are arriving late here. All right. So, excuse me, loosening my belt, which is something I recommend if you have belt issue, if you have any kind of pressure around the middle of your body. It's nice to have either an elastic belt or just loosen it for meditation. It's very, very interesting how as soon as I sort of just settle into a posture and relax, that my stomach like releases, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I guess it's kind of the first indication that we have tension in our body. Just noticing that. So giving yourself space, literal space in your clothing to breathe. And so settling into a comfortable posture, you can sit upright if that's workable for you, and you can lie down if that's more helpful. In the lying down posture, we just want to be careful of drowsiness, and you might find you need to open your eyes during the meditation. And you can actually close your eyes or let your eyes just be downward cast so that you're really moving out of the visual world. Such a compelling sense that really it takes us away from being aware of our inner life, or just feeling and sensing through the other sense doors. And just letting the body soften. Releasing the shoulders. Just having a feeling of the body being drawn downward to the earth, letting gravity do its work. So yeah, first thing that I notice is the belly, but then other parts of the body too, can feel them kind of just releasing. And you can use the breath in that process too. Kind of intentional softening with the breath. And just letting the mind scan through the body, just kind of landing at different points to just to feel your body, to feel this element, this dense field of energy that is our body. Might tune into the hands, the face, the feet, really any other parts of the body that stand out for you. And again, feeling the breath moving in the body. You might just be aware of the chest rising and falling, or the broader torso, or the belly, the ribs, even the back. We're all engaged in the breathing process. So that's kind of bringing awareness to almost the mechanics of breathing. Quite interesting to just explore that. You can, okay. Can also feel the breath as the touch of air coming in and out of the body. So this is feeling the sensation, letting the sensation be the focal point. It's worth only exploring for yourself what's the most helpful way for you to bring mindfulness to breathing. There isn't necessarily a correct way or a wrong way. So rather than trying to do it right, instead we just notice, what do I find natural or easy in paying attention to the breath? Let me just enjoy that. And as you try to focus on the breath, it's very natural that the mind wanders, gets caught up in thinking. So the most essential element of this practice is the returning to the breath when we see that the mind has wandered. In that process of just noticing thoughts and returning, we may sense that there's more going on, that things are a bit more complicated below the surface than just breath and thoughts. And that can trigger more thinking and just become another mental excursion that's not really helpful. But as the body and mind start to settle at least a little bit, if we pay attention, we'll start to see that there are other elements of our experience that are going on just a little bit below the surface of our awareness. We can actually notice if we turn our attention there, and particularly pointing to what can be called the felt experience. This, in a way, is the bridge between the thoughts and the breath. So we know that thoughts trigger feelings, different emotions, mood, attitudes, beliefs. And feelings are felt. They aren't thought. But they're not exactly part of our ordinary sense experience, like a sound, a smell. So in our mindfulness practice, a vital part is to cultivate a sensitivity to this subtle form of feeling that's in the body, but not exactly a physical experience, more of a energetic experience, perhaps. Where we can point to is when there is a thought, particularly a strong thought, one that kind of grips your mind. as you come back to the breath, to then notice how that thought feels, what feelings arose triggered by that thought. And let yourself feel the breath moving, rising and falling, the chest and belly. And the breath moves into the feeling. You might say it holds the feeling or gives space for the feeling. Language doesn't quite capture the experience, just points to it. And this is a delicate process because we tend to kind of pull back from feelings, kind of avoid them. When we turn to them with the breath, there can be some resistance, some fear. It takes a kind of gentle, gradual process, just letting in as much as feels safe. And then just turn again to the sensation of breath. Just be with that simple experience. All right. I'm not sure what the mute all button apparently wasn't working properly there. There was a couple of little noisy interruptions there. Not sure what that was. So before I start this talk, I just wanted to mention, I think I've been pushing this, I think, a lot in my guided meditations, the idea of, being with your felt experience, and, always a challenging thing to sort of describe. But I also really want to recommend that you're careful with that practice as well, because it can, if there's sort of submerged feelings or traumas and things that can kind of get triggered when we are just sort of way open, or really sort of almost like looking for it. So if you ever feel like getting flooded with anxiety or despair, any of those fun emotions, really just open your eyes first and just sort of stop like meditating in a way. Just breathe a bit, like, okay, I'm okay. Just remind, and then if you're going to return it into that, you use a process they call titrating, which is just to like allowing in a little bit, just kind of like, can I feel a little, and sort of trying to really keep a sense of groundedness, of just like, I am in a body. There is a body here. And I am in a safe place. It's okay. And then see, just let in enough that feels safe. So just to be careful with that. I wanted to mention that because I have been kind of, in a sense, pushing people, and I don't want people to get pushed further than is comfortable or safe for them. So as I warned you, I was going to get into something pretty deep Dharma, and this is I want to talk about something that's called the 5 aggregates. I'm going to put this into the chat. Form, feeling, perception, volitional formations. Let's just call it thoughts for now. It's not quite exactly, and then consciousness. So I misspelled aggregates, and you can't edit this. So aggregate, it's supposed to be a G where that first T is. Sorry. This is so one of the first places in the suttas where we encounter this phrase says, this is in the first teaching that the Buddha gave on the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the Eightfold Path. He says, when he's talking about the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, now this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So it's kind of a cryptic statement there in the sutta. The 5 aggregates subject to suffering, subject to clinging. And so, he's outlined this idea that clinging is the cause of suffering. So we already sort of know that. So what's he talking about? So to start with, the Buddha refers to the 5 aggregates in relationship to our belief or understanding that there is a permanent, separate self. And he says that this misconception that there is a permanent, separate self is created because there are these 5 things that we are experiencing, that because they're all happening at once, they create this illusion that there's something solid here. So these are the 5 things: form, which just is our body. And then the feelings that come about because we have a body. And so those feelings are sense-based. We're experiencing all the pleasant and unpleasant and neutral experiences of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and thinking. So all that stuff is happening at once, right? We have this body, and then there's all this like data that's coming in, just, and then all of that data is tabulated and categorized by the 3rd aggregate, perception. So we've got this body, we're getting all this stuff coming in, but if we didn't have any way of understanding it, we'd kind of freak out because it'd be like, what's going on? It'd be like a fun house, right? Just like all this stuff. But because we have memory and all this experience that we accumulate through our conditioning and our training as infants and children, and ongoing, but particularly during that time, everything goes into its place. And it's like, okay, that's fine. There's my guitar, there's my chair, there's my ring light, there's the screen, and then I have names for a lot of you, and there's names on the screen that tell me what your name, all of that stuff. Okay, all right, everything makes sense. I get it. This stuff, it all has functions, and it's like, it's fine. Perception, great. It's not a problem. So I've got this body, I'm getting all this sense input, but I've got a way of categorizing it. Out of that, all that stuff, well, then I start having thoughts and ideas about it and things I'm going to do about it. So those are called volitional formations, but basically thoughts. So, okay, I've got my computer here. It's such and such a clock. It's time for me to talk. Like now I'm going to talk, and then I'm going, so I'm, then everything, like with volitional formations, it's like you've set everything up, and now you turn the ignition and you start to run, right? That's you start being you and doing your thing. And all of this is contained in this mystery we call consciousness. And one of the ways the Buddha talks about consciousness is that there is eye consciousness, ear consciousness, mouth, tongue consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. So that when there is this process of form, feeling, and perception happening, that there's this way of perceiving, the sort of the mechanism, the sort of larger container of it, is that holds it all, it's hard to talk about consciousness. I'm not good at that. It's like, but let me move on to my larger point that I wanted to get to today, because that's just the 5 aggregates. So, and one of the things that can be very interesting, just as reflection, and this is not something I would so much do in meditation, but as a reflective or contemplative practice, is to take the 3 characteristics. I told you this was going to be deep Dharma. So to take the 3 characteristics and line them up with the 5 aggregates. So you're familiar with the 3 characteristics, but I will remind you what they are. Dukkha, anicca, anatta, suffering, not self, suffering, impermanence, not self. But I want to talk about self today, because if we do all 3, then we're going to have like way too much to cover. But just to do it with self, it's very interesting. So there are 3 ways that we have the feeling that there's a self. I, me, and mine. Famous George Harrison song, So what's that about? So let's now go to the aggregates. And so that what we do is we ask the question, the larger question is there a self? And through these three ways that we think of and talk about self, I am, it's me, it's mine. Let's talk about form or body. Am I my body? Are you your body? Look for you might have a picture around the house somewhere, the apartment, the motel, the tent, wherever you're staying, of yourself when you were a child. Look at that. All you have to do is look at that picture and go, oh, well, is that me or is this me? Well, whatever it is, my body keeps changing, so it can't be self. But we can see right away that there's this connection between anatta, not self, and impermanence, right? It can't be me. I can't be my body because my body keeps changing. Now, another way that the Buddha talks about, well, no, we'll talk about it when we get to mind. So me is a funny one. Like, my body is me. Is my body me? So it's a slight shift, but you can see it's like, oh yeah, it's a different viewpoint. Is my body me? Well, I mean, you think of, if, I think we think of ourselves as, and again, the aggregates point to this. Well, no, because my body can't be me, because what about my thoughts and my memories and, blah, blah, everything else? Okay, no, my body isn't me, And then finally, is my body mine? Well, if it were, I can tell you that mine would be functioning differently. It would probably look quite a bit differently too. And so a great thing to remember is that the Buddha says that if you possess something, you have control of it. So how much control do you have of your body? Well, I can stand up, I can walk, yeah, okay. So next time you don't want to be hungry, try telling your body not to be hungry. Next time you want to be younger and prettier, handsomer, just tell your body to be younger and more attractive. No, of course you don't control your body. You have a certain relationship of, you participate in controlling your body, but you are not in control of your body. So I am not my body. My body is not me. My body is not mine. Okay, feeling. Let's talk about our feelings. Am I my feelings? Well, a lot of times we do. First of all, I will say we can see that we do define ourselves in this way. When I look in the mirror, what I think I'm seeing is me. When I see that form, when I feel sad, anxious, happy, I feel like I'm having a feeling. I am my feelings. But bring in impermanence again, my feelings change so rapidly. I can't possibly say that I am my feelings. If I were, I'd have to name one feeling that I am, or that the feelings, all of the changing feelings, they're all me. Well, what does that even mean? So, am I my feelings? No. Are my feelings me? I hope not, because it'd be really a problem. But there's no doubt that there have been times when I've defined myself by my feelings. Like, I am depressed is a way of saying depression is me, is who I am. It's because if we think of the verb to be as an equal sign, in that sentence, then it's I equal depression. Depression equals me. That's who I am. As many of you know, that sort of one of my tendencies of depressive tendencies. But that's not who I am, hell, God forbid. Okay, I am not my feelings. My feelings are not me. Are my feelings mine? Whew. Man, oh man, definitely. If I, if owning something means you're in control of them, definitely not in control of them, right? So my feelings aren't I, me, or mine. Okay, how about perception? Okay, well, perception is so conditioned. Like, am I my perceptions? Like the here it's even more there. There's a quality of increased subtlety and refinement as we go through the aggregates. We start with the most solid thing, the body, and then feelings, which are felt in the body, but they're still very much, there's an energetic quality to them. There's an existent quality to them. Perception now is really purely a mental experience. And it's just naming stuff based on memory and training. Guitar is a different word in a different language. So what I'm calling guitar is called something different. So it's not really that. But I mean, perception can also operate on a more basic level than just naming. It's also when I look at it, I know what it is as a functional thing. That thing over there that's shaped like this and has metal, strings running through it, all of that, that's a musical instrument that I can go over and pick up and play and make sound with. So there's a whole story, right, around it. But is my relationship to that, or even to, this, am I that? I mean, God, that's like this really odd thing to even think that my way of seeing the world and understanding it is who I am. No, of course not. But you can see that. So I am not that. My perceptions are not me, and they are not mine, because everything that I understand about the world, I was taught. It was all, and it's all through memory. It's not something I created. But again, I can see that this, in a way, our perception is kind of our filter of the world, and that because it includes our beliefs and our opinions about things. And so it kind of, there is a way that it feels like it's mine, or that it's kind of me. It kind of defines me, like I'm a Democrat, that's a perception, right? And, or, I'm a musician, and I'm a Dharma teacher. All these ways that I'm sort of defining myself, giving myself a name. Those are really important, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father. All and again, the Buddha calls these the 5 aggregates of clinging. Right? We cling to our form, we cling to our feelings, we cling to our perceptions. There's a reason that we do this. It's not that human beings are crazy and stupid that they create this belief system, because it's a very functional belief system. It's a very functional way of operating, is to see the aggregates as self. And it is how we function. And it's perfectly okay that we do that. But what the Dharma is trying to do is say, look, that's useful. That's a useful fiction. But if you get caught up in it, it creates suffering. Use it, you don't have to go around and say, I have no name. There is no self. I don't exist. It's like, no, you get to the you want to go onto an airplane, you're like, let me see your identification. Oh, well, I'm not a self. There is no self. What do you mean? Why do I have to show you my ID? I don't exist. They're like, okay, you're going to go over there. They're going to search you now. They're going to go through all of your luggage. So it's very functional, it's useful. But we can see, and this is how being attached to my form, think of all the pain you've had around your own body, just around the illnesses you've had, your self-image about how you look, your weight, all these things that we create suffering around, and worst of all, like, it's getting old and I'm going to die. It's going to, like, not going to be around. That's really suffering. Think of all the suffering around your feelings, but, being caught up in feelings that you were attached to, that you couldn't let go of, that you were overwhelmed by, or your perceptions, your beliefs about people, your judgments, your opinions about them. All the clinging. So we get to volitional formations, thoughts. Of course, we know, am I my thoughts? Well, there's definitely that idea that, my thoughts kind of, that's who I am. There's Descartes, I think, therefore I am, the critical Western concept of self right there. And obviously it's an ill-considered philosophy. There's really, like, doesn't seem like there was much reflection on that. I don't know, judging poor Renee. But are my thoughts me? This is why meditation is so interesting. You watch your thoughts for a while, and there's some that are like, well, it's a pretty good thought. And it's like, what the hell was that thought? And wait a minute, I was just thinking the opposite of that a minute ago. How did that happen? And you start to see, no, there's just chaos in there, to a great extent. I am not my thoughts. Goodness. Are my thoughts me? And are my thoughts mine? Whew. Do you really want to be like, go into court and say, yes, that is my thought? Okay, well, you're going to prison because you're a dangerous person, Like, no, you don't want to defend your thoughts as belonging to you. You certainly don't have control over them by the Buddhist definition of possession, right? Part of our practice of meditation is to bring more control to the thoughts, to be less caught in the negative and destructive and unhelpful thoughts, the thoughts of clinging and craving, and to be more inclined towards constructive, wise thoughts of generosity, of renunciation, of loving kindness. And again, we can see how it's easy to become identified with our thoughts. They're really, much of the time, they define our world. We have our senses operating, but you walk around in your life, and where are you most of the time? Most of the time you're in here in this stream of thoughts, So very easy to get caught in that. But again, they're so impermanent. They're so ethereal, to define yourself as your thoughts. I am not my thoughts. They are not mine. And finally, consciousness, which is kind of a consciousness. One way, there's two ways I think we can think of it. That consciousness maybe is the first aggregate, in a way, that before there's consciousness, there isn't any awareness of any of this stuff. But the other way to think of it is that it's through all these other things that creates this sort of whole vision of experience, because we don't really experience the aggregates as separate things. We experience them as a container, and that container is consciousness. You're sitting here and you are, you're feeling your body, maybe not in the foreground, but your senses are operating. There are feelings there are perceptions, there are mental formations, volitional formations, all happening at once. And they're happening in this, we can say that they come together to create this sense of some holistic experience that we can call consciousness. So am I that? And this is where even Buddhists can get somewhat tripped up here. That when people say something like Buddha nature, or my true self, who I really am, I hear very, senior Buddhist teachers use phrases like this, and I often kind of feel like I'm not quite comfortable with that. What are we talking about? And I'm not going to try to answer that question exactly, but I will say that again, just in terms of our misapprehension here, when people talk about soul, having a soul, I think it's very much because there's this knowing, there's this capacity to know, and this consciousness that seems continuous and seems solid in some way, even though it's completely unsolid in any physical sense, but seems to have sort of a continuity and a existence, a separate existence. When we look at what the Buddha says about consciousness, though, he only says it arises only when there is this whole process happening. It's not if there's no form, feeling, perception, mental formations, particularly the form and the sense contact, then consciousness doesn't arise. Really difficult thing to test because you would have to get to a state where you were having no sense experience, no sense contact. Now, this supposedly can be done on very deep levels of concentration that I've never gotten to. The 9th jhana, cessation or nirodha. So, to go off that, leap off that cliff. No, thank you. So, am I my consciousness? I think this is one I'm not going to try to say too much about, because I'll let you guys decide for yourself. Is my consciousness me? But I do think if you say, is consciousness mine? Is there some consciousness that I am in control of? Well, there I pretty much can say definitely not, because I don't even know how consciousness arises, or what consciousness is, right? This is one of the questions that the modern neuroscientists are still debating. So here's the Buddha. Monks, form is non-self. Or if monks' form were self, this form would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible to determine form, to control form. You could say to yourself, let my form be thus, let my body be like this. Let my body not be like this. But because form is non-self, form leads to affliction, and it is not possible to determine form. And then he goes through all the aggregates. Feeling is not self, for if feeling were self, this feeling would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible to control my feelings. Perception is not self, for if perception were self, it would not lead to affliction. It would be possible to control perception. Thoughts, volitional formations are not self. If volitional formations were self, they would not lead to affliction. Thoughts would not lead to suffering if they were not self. If they were self, it would be possible to determine thoughts, just to say to ourselves, let my thoughts be thus, let my thoughts not be thus. And then consciousness is not self. If consciousness were, if were self, if this consciousness were self, it would not lead to affliction. It would be possible to say to my consciousness, let my consciousness be this way, let my consciousness not be that way. So clearly this is not what we would typically call like a meditative experience, you know, a meditative insight that we're talking about. But it's, I think, you know, in terms of like breaking down this belief in self, which is so important in this process. It's important in the process of recovery, and it's important in the process of cultivating understanding of the Dharma. Having this very intentional and contemplative way to just ask these questions helps to chip away at the belief, the perception that there is a self. And so in order to uproot the perception of self, that happens through insight, through clear seeing. And that clear seeing is supported by this clear thinking. Now, this is like right view, developing right view and a right understanding about what self is. And then trying to remember that insight and notice when selfing starts to happen, when I starts to happen. And you can do this in your meditation, to just notice every time there's a thought, to look at it and see, is there I, me, or mine happening in that thought? And so gradually we're starting to undermine and deconstruct this belief system that eventually, hopefully, can lead to a thorough uprooting. But even, barring that, to simply be able to remember, oh, like this is right now, I'm really getting caught up in self. This is not about me right now, this situation, and to be able to keep that space around your selfing, that alone can relieve a certain amount of the affliction that the Buddha talks about. I mean, because going back to basic recovery principles, it was self-centeredness that was the cause of our problems, right? The 12-step literature, self-centeredness, and just to be able to, you don't have to get into this like lofty idea of like 5 aggregates to just see, oh, I'm being very self-centered right now, or I'm taking this very personally. Is this really about me? How am I viewing this? And where am I trying to get in this situation? Do I want to get a positive outcome from this? Oh, maybe I should let go of this way I'm approaching this as being about me. So Ajahn Amaro has this great phrase I'll use. He says, I offer these words for your reflection. So I hope that's helpful. And I've used up the entire time, as I suspected I would, because we didn't even really get into dukkha and anicca, but the anatta approach to the 5 aggregates. But I will hang out for a little while if people need to go. I know some of you are like taking a break from work or had other plans, but I'll hang out for a little while if anybody wants to chime in and make a comment or ask a question. And Gail, hi.
Hi, Kevin. Hey, thank you for this talk. And this is a little bit off Buddhism, so I hope this isn't too sidetracking. But you know, the Savante Pablo got the Nobel Peace Prize yesterday in science, in medicine, and he studies Neanderthals. That's what I've been studying for quite a while now, Neanderthals and early humans. And as I listen to you, this almost sounds like the evolution that we have gone through.
That's right.
First, we're aware that we have a body, ouch. And then we're aware of a feeling, I'm hungry. And then it goes to perception, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, and it sort of goes right through it. And of course, the big question has always been, the arising of consciousness,
right?
You know, and then the idea that I am separate. I don't know that early on that we had that concept. The thing that seems to be most common among hunter-gatherers today is that notion that we're all connected and that there is no kind of separation between me and everything else. And I have found that extremely helpful in AA when we talk about God and higher power, which I find very confusing ideas. But the notion that we are all connected is how I have been able to move out of self, because that connection is like, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And when I think of Buddhism, I kind of think of it as well as the ideas of all connection of all things. And I know this is not Buddhism, but the similarities are just striking to me as you went through this. And, I find it, having this fella who studies Neanderthals, get the Nobel Peace Prize sort of vindicates me in AA meetings when I mentioned that I study Neanderthals, and I get these looks, like she's outer space. Anyway, so I just thought I'd throw that out as kind of the fun part of listening to what you were talking about today, and I really appreciate your shares or your insights.
Thank you, Gail. That's really great. And I've certainly had this same thought about the aggregates as defining, as capturing a sense of human evolution. And yeah, we can even see it as the evolution of the brain, that the consciousness then is the prefrontal cortex, that only humans have developed to the level that we do. And I also look at meditation as a deconstruction, or so therefore like a de-evolution, a sort of mentally reversing evolution back to something very primal. That we kind of just get into the body, and then we start to see these different elements, and we're trying to let go of the clinging that arises related to each of these things, which means that in some way we're letting go of them arising at all. and so that we're trying to get to just pure being. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting reflection about interconnection, because the distinction of being a separate self, which we know is a really important part of human development as infants, right? When we realize that, we're separate from the mother, right? So we can also see that there's this aspect of the meditation in this process that's reversing just our own growth as bodies and as human beings. But but seeing yourself as separate is excuse me, is an important functional tool in our existence. But just like all these other things, like the aggregates and are an important functional tool, but they become this problem when there's attachment to them. In the same way, it's important to be able to function as a separate human being. But when you are attached to that view, it creates suffering. And this is classic Buddhism in the sense that what is being demanded of us is that we take a middle way in this process, that we don't become attached to everything being interconnected to the point that we lose the functionality of oh, I have to take care of myself, but we aren't so attached to individuality that we become Americans, shall we say, who function in these and create these all the problems that come with seeing everybody as being totally self-reliant, which is a completely unrealistic way of operating. So again, I mean, the one of the great challenges of Buddhism is that it doesn't give us this solid thing like, oh, just there's no self, just let it all go, or just everything is separate, keep it. No, it's easier for our minds, and our minds want these kind of solid, singular answers. And the Dharma shows us that those any singular answer leads to suffering and clinging. And so we're faced with this challenge to operate in this area that holds two truths, the true realities, and then functions within them. So one of the great elements of this, the challenges of this process. I'll just note that I see Vanessa has has created a Facebook group. So awesome. Thank you, Vanessa, wherever you are, whoever you are. I'm not sure how well it will work. Hope it'll be useful. If you want to join, send me an email to Vanessa. I'm just reading this for people, so it's there in the chat if you're interested. There's some thanks in there, and that's great. I appreciate it very much. I think that's a good idea. I mean, I guess I sort of avoid Facebook groups. So I'm afraid of them. I don't know what they are. I mean, I sort of do. Anyway, I know what they are. Mary Helen, hello. Do you want to chime in here?
Well, it's sort of mostly with a question. I noticed as you were going through the self, I, me, mine, that the common thread seemed to be, well, if it's mine, then I must have control over it. And do I have control over? And that issue of control seemed to me to be an issue that was problematic for me. So do I have control over my heartbeat? Do I have control over my breath? Right. Do I have control over my digestion? Mm-hmm. Do I have control over my blood pressure? Is there a problem with our focusing on control, that it isn't mine unless I can control it? Mm-hmm. So I experience things that I don't control, and focusing on my control is part of what's a problem for us as human beings, or certainly as addicts. Control is an issue. So I'm just kind of stuck on that. And I may come back and listen to the rest of the talk, because I think it was really, really thought-provoking.
So is there another way we could talk about something being mine, and because what we're getting at is how believing that something is mine ultimately causes suffering. That's the point of this in terms of what we're trying to learn from this and get out of this. So whether we define it as I'm in control of something that's mine, or just I have possession of something that's mine. I mean, that's a more basic way of thinking of something is mine, right? I possess it. So what does possession mean? To me, the problem with possession, again, is impermanence, that everything I possess changes. I can't hold on to anything that I possess. So saying that it's so if it were mine, if it belonged to me, if I owned it, would that mean that I could keep it from going away? If it can go away, or if it can break, is it really mine? Do I possess it? Then no, I just temporarily, I have custody of it, but I don't own it in the sense that it's just, it's going to go away. So it's not really mine. I mean, it kind of comes back to I guess the same point about ownership, but, or control. But I think the idea is that if it's mine, it shouldn't do things I don't want it to do. And unfortunately, but maybe somewhat illuminatingly, the Buddha compares my owning something to having a slave, which, the very fact that he would talk about that tells us that there was slavery at the time of the Buddha. So and his idea, he says, like I can control a slave, right? Like I can tell a slave what to do. So that's a concept. Of course, you can't actually control a slave either, ultimately, but in that kind of metaphor, if you imagine what a slave is supposed to be, it's something that is totally under your control.
But it seems to me that the idea of control is a problematic idea for us as humans.
Well, yeah, but what say more about that? I'm not sure what aspect of that you're talking about.
Well, it just seems to me to it suggests a certain way of looking at the world that's more patriarchal and power oriented, control oriented, and the image of the Buddha talking about the control over a slave, it even brings that forward more.
Yeah.
More in crisper detail.
Yeah, more graphic.
And that's a problem with an experience of being human, I think. So I don't know. It just, I just keep thinking about it. I don't think there's any.
No, I mean, I think that's what the point of this teaching is, that any kind of relationship of possession of something belonging to you, whether it's your body or your car, is doomed to to disappoint you. And so it's the 5 aggregates of clinging subject to suffering. There you go. It's like, yeah, anything you try to hold on to will eventually cause you suffering. So, yeah. Thank you. Dolores?
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. You're in my thoughts and prayers. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
I'm a cancer survivor. You really helped me to see something very clearly today about my consciousness, that it's impermanent as well as everything else. Because I have struggled all my life to define a concept of God, from a punitive God to a loving God to an energy. I see God as an energy, beautiful, loving energy that's in all of us. That's what I learned through the 12-step program, that higher power.
Yeah.
But lately I've been talking about I am more aware of my higher consciousness. Like that's where my God is. Like I'm calling my God my higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But you helped me today, because I can get stuck in egotistically thinking, you know what I mean? It's my higher consciousness.
Yep.
But that's not
Yep.
permanent either.
Right.
So
right.
thank you for that.
And it does not belong. It doesn't belong to you.
Yeah. I can be aware of it. I can experience it and love it, but I could lose it in a New York second.
Yep.
If I get into myself.
That's beautiful, Dolores.
So thank you so much for that today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for pointing to that. I think that's a great note to end on. Really very wise. Oh, well, I'm sorry, Kate, you raised your hand. Go ahead. I don't have to leave. I was just
a quick comment, but thank you again for this teaching. Very heartfelt. And I'm reminded in the discussion of after in our smaller discussion here, the quality of interbeing and how that helps me to not attach ownership to things that are so illusionary for me. And that's what seems to help me understand more the concept of no self. And also, for some reason, it kept coming up is, 30 years ago in college, reading the book by Martin Buber, We, Me, and Thou, and how that back then started to trigger this sense of, oh, this isn't the Kate show. And so that too, there were just things filtering in today, and I just wanted to jump on and say thank you.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. So I appreciate people, chiming in and talking about it. So, just as a closing, just to suggest, in the next couple of days, just notice the way self arises in the mind, the sense of a self, and see what happens when you let it go. So hope you enjoy your day. Take care.